Chapter 13 of Crispin, The Cross of Lead by Avi. Next morning I awoke to the sound of galloping hoofs. Greatly alarmed, I pressed myself upon the ground and lifted my head just enough to see the road. It was John Aycliffe, the steward, as well as the man I'd seen with him in the woods. The bailiff was there too. The three went racing by, sweeping quickly out of sight. "Thank you, St. Giles," I whispered, "for protecting me." In a sweat from fright, I rolled up on my back and stared into the branches above. A cold rain was falling. The light was dim. Stiff in limb, chilled in bone, numb in thought, I shifted about. As I did, some tiny animal scurried into the underbrush. Oh, how I then wished that I could be such a wee creature, small enough to hide so well. As I lay there, I remembered Goodwife Peregrine's pouch that hung about my neck. With a spurt of hope, I sat up and emptied the contents into my hand. To my dismay, it contained 3 seeds, one of wheat, one of barley, and one of oats, plus my mother's cross of lead. Sorely disappointed, I tossed the seeds away, but decided to keep the cross in the pouch as the solitary connection to my past. If I hoped to live, I knew I could not return to Stromford. Yet my fear of the open road was just as dire. What if I were to be seen by the steward? And beyond that, recalling Father Quinnell's description of towns and cities, I was too timid to press on. I, who had already gone farther from my home than I had ever gone before, I, whose life had become so quickly altered, I, who had never really had to make important choices about anything, now I had to decide everything for myself. The result was that I stayed where I was. In truth, I dreaded going far from the road, lest I lose the muddy thread that connected me to the only life I knew. In faith, I did not know how to do otherwise. Thus, for the next 2 days, I kept to the forest, only now and then meandering off at short distances in search of food. All I found were acorns and bitter roots. All in all, I spent my time in an aimless, crushing sadness, consumed by an alternating dread and desire that I might be caught. If I were caught, at least my misery would have ended. It was during the afternoon of the second day that I saw the bailiff again upon the road. Alone he was, I suppose, heading back toward Stromford. While somewhat reassured, I wondered where the steward was. I could not help thinking he was waiting ahead for me. But once the bailiff passed, I made myself recall my mission. I needed to get far from Stromford to some city or town that had its own liberties. It was what Father Quinnell had told me to do. Such thoughts forced me back upon the road, where I continued on. Sometimes I stumbled. Sometimes I sat by the roadside, head tucked within my folded arms while waiting. I knew not for what. Then, yet again, pushed by the need to act, to move, to do anything, I went on. Late that day, besieged by fears, very lonely and quite famished, I fell to my knees and prayed with deep-hearted sobbing words. In these prayers, I acknowledged my great unworthiness to my Lord Jesus and searched my heart for every sin to which I could confess. This time, I begged him to gather me that I might join my mother in his holy heaven. The truth was, and how great my shame, I no longer wished to live, which was, I knew, a sin. End of chapter 13. Crispin, The Cross of Lead by Avi.